finishes the French fourth round, and now we go to the coalition's fourth round, and this is the last round of clear weather. Coalition now will replace its empty space with a card keeping the same facing. Coalition has 4 cards left. Okay, the coalition is going to roll their fate die, and now they're freed from those restrictions regarding Ulm and Mantua. Here's their roll. And they roll AB. So we're going to be able to turn the cards in A and B face up, and they can play either of the cards for the event or for their activations. And I think they're going to play the card Bombardment of Copenhagen for its activation. They've got 2 points of activation. They also have stored a point. So they actually have a total of 3 they could use. We're going to reduce their cards remaining down to 3. And I think what the coalition is going to do is they're going to begin by spending 2 points to activate Charles's force. He's going to abandon the siege of Mantua, and he's going to rush to Vienna and try to take on Napoleon's Grande Armée. Now, one thing that is interesting is Napoleon's supply line back to France is quite fragile. Force that of Archduke John in Innsbruck could easily sever that by moving back into Ulm. And that might be another consideration for us. The problem is the time factor. Right now it's round 4. This is our last round of clear weather. Another consideration is Mach's army of Germany is demoralized. Now, we could attempt to rally his forces. He would have to activate the force and then spend 2 movement points per attempt to rally his forces. So those are the considerations that the Austrians have right now. We have enough to activate 1 force, either Charles, Mach's army, or Kutuzov's Russian army. That would be another option. But there's only enough activation to do 1 of those. The other option is to activate Archduke John and have him sever Napoleon's communications. That might be an interesting idea as well. Napoleon cannot defeat Austria unless he has a supplied army in control of the capital and either both of the critical zones of that country or 1 zone and no Austrian army on the board. Those are the choices. So I think we'll let a die roll determine what the Austrians are going to do. Roll of 1 will activate John's force, and he'll try to sever the line of communications back to the Grande Armée. Number 2, roll of 2 will be activate Charles's force and have him march and try to take on Napoleon. Number 3 will be to activate Mach's army and see if he can rally the troops. And on a roll of 4, we'll activate the Russians and General Kutuzov with the Russian First Army. On a roll of 5 or 6, we'll re-roll. Result is a 2. That's going to be to activate Charles's force in Mantua. So we'll use the 2 activation points activating Charles's force. He's going to abandon the siege of Mantua, and he is going to march and attempt to confront Napoleon in Vienna. And he's going to need a minimum of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movement points. So he's going to have to attempt a 2-point forced march in order to reach that location. So we're going to give Charles 2-point forced march, and then he'll start his movement. All right, he's going to spend 1 movement point to return back to Venice. He'll spend 1 plus 1 for the mountain pass. That's 3 to move across the mountain range. He'll spend a 4th point to enter Carinthia. And there, Napoleon can attempt an interception if he chooses. And let's see if he'll be able to do that. That would earn Napoleon an extra +1 on his interception if he's able to complete that. It's going to cost him a card, though. I think Napoleon will pass, and Charles will enter Vienna and bring Napoleon to battle. Now, the demoralized army of Germany is ineligible to do a countermarch. or an interception. So we'll set these forces up and resolve the battle. All right, prior to the start of the battle, Charles has to resolve his 2-point forced march. Charles's force consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strength points. We'll use the 6 to 8 column. He'll be getting a +2 dice roll modifier for the 2 points he moved. And he will have national territory if the movement is entirely within the national territory. That's a -2. And that would be true. He started this in Mantua, but the movement, well, movement is entirely in national territory. I guess it won't qualify for that. I'm going to take a look at that a little more closely in the rule book. Well, I couldn't find anything in the rule book when it says movement entirely across the national territory. If the movement is entirely in the national territory, well, it wasn't. They started in Mantua, so they won't get that benefit. He'll be at a +2 for the roll. So he'll be using the 6 to 8 column. Here's the D6. He rolls a 5. That's a total of 7 on that column. Is a 1 step plus an asterisk. So he'll re-roll. On a 4, 5, or 6, he has to lose 2 steps. No, so only 1. He will reduce the 9th corps. And now we're ready to start our battle computation. First step would be counter marches. Well, the Army of Germany is demoralized, so they won't be able to attempt a countermarch. Then we'll compute our odds. The odds are 5 against 8. It comes out to 0.625, and that'll be rounded up to 1-to-1. That's a 0 modifier. Then we'll compute our level of battle. We have a total of 13 factors. That will be a small battle. We'll be using the middle column. Then we determine our morale. The Austrians will be at a 3, and the French will be at a 5. There's 3 formations with 5, 1 of 6, and 2 of 4. So it'll be morale 5 for Napoleon's Grande Armée. Now we'll do combat modifiers. Combat odds are 0, +0 for 1-to-1. Cavalry superiority will go to the French. 2 reserve cavalry plus Murat is 3, none for the Austrians. So that means that French will gain +1 for cavalry superiority, and we'll mark them accordingly. Then we have terrain effects. In this case, there are no terrain effects. We're in clear terrain and no one crossed any rivers or passes. Then we do our supply checks. Napoleon is in supply back through to mainland France, and Charles is drawing supply from the fortress of Isaac. So no problems there. Next, we can declare elite or special units. The Austrians don't have any elite units, and I believe Napoleon is going to commit his 1st Corps as a special unit. That will give him a +1 for the elite star on the unit. Then we get bonuses for the commanding generals. Charles has an attack level of 1, so he will gain +1 for his tactical ability. Napoleon has 3, so we will move this up to 5. Then we would consider any subordinate generals if in an army. Napoleon will nominate Davout, and that's a 3, so we're up to 8 right now. We'll get another die and mark that accordingly. Napoleon is at +8. And then we can play combat cards. The Austrians have a combat card, but it won't be applicable until the morale phase if they choose to use it. Napoleon is going to play his card, Cuirassiers. That's going to give him a +2 bonus if cavalry general is present, and there is. So that's going to move Napoleon up to +10. That is absolutely amazing. We'll have to deduct a card from Napoleon, moving his cards remaining from 4 down to 3. All right. And now we're going to resolve the battle by rolling 2 dice and checking that middle column. We'll roll for the attacking Austrians first. They're only gaining a +1 DRM. And they rolled very poorly. They only rolled a 3. This is going to be a disaster for the Austrians. That's a total 4. And we'll roll for the French, and they're getting a +10 dice roll modifier. And they rolled a 9. They've got 19. I think the table maxes out at 18. All right, those are that's the resolution of the battle. And checking our battle chart, the Austrians have rolled a 4, and that's a 0+ rating. The plus means that if it was tied, they would gain the advantage. So 0 losses on the French. French rolled a total of 19. That'll max out at 16, and they're going to get a 4C+ result, meaning 4 losses. A step of cavalry must be eliminated if possible, and that's the results of the battle. The French have won. Now we have to check for wounded generals, and we did commit Davout as a subordinate, so we'll roll a d6 for him. On a 6, he's wounded. And he rolled a 5, so he is okay. He did not get wounded in the battle. Now we're going to remove our losses. The French received no losses in the battle, but the Austrians have taken a total of 4 hits. And they're going to have to lose 4 points, including one of them being reserve cavalry. So they're going to take the reserve cavalry as one of their... Oh, they don't have any reserve cavalry. Okay, so in this case it's 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that will be the division of loss for Charles's force. It'll take care of all of the battle damage. And now we have to do a demoralization test for Charles. He currently has a morale of 3, and he is going to take the difference in losses, in this case 4, so it's going to be a -1. He cannot pass that. You can't roll any lower than -1 with a single die, so his force is demoralized. And so we'll mark Charles with a demoralization marker. Now the Austrians did have a combat card that they could have used. They could have played Monarch Takes Command, and that would have raised the morale of the force by 2, but at -1 that would have brought them up to a 1, and then you're looking for a 1 in 6 chance basically of passing the test, so it wasn't worth playing. Now we have Cavalry Pursuit. Napoleon will use Cavalry Pursuit. His offensive capability is 3. They're going to gain 2 points for the reserve cavalry and 1 for Murat, and they're up to 6 now. We'll roll a d6, and any value over 6 will take additional casualties on the Austrians. And they've rolled a 6, so 12 is greater than 6 greater than 6. So Charles's force is completely obliterated, and that's removed from the map. So that's going to complete the battle in Vienna. Napoleon holds the field, and the coalition has spent 2 of their 2 available points. They do have 1 in reserve, but 1 point isn't enough to activate any sizable force. So they will end their portion of the 4th round, and we'll move on to the French 5th round. The French 5th round is going to be a bad weather round. That means that movement rates will be at -1 for all parties. All right, the French are going to make their fate die roll. They have 3 cards remaining. Result is an A, B, and C. So we're going to flip up A, B, and C, and we can choose one of those cards for any purpose. And given this selection of cards, I think we're going to have Napoleon use a 1-point activation. That way we can preserve our remaining 3 cards. So Napoleon is going to activate, and I think what he's going to do is he's going to dispatch Marshal Davout and a full-strength elite 1st Corps, and we're going to leave them to garrison Vienna. He's going to move his force north, and he's going to capture Prague, which is also one of those important locations for Austria. If we can control the two important locations and the capital, we'll have defeated Austria at the end of the round. Now this is a poor weather turn, so we lose a movement point. Napoleon's Grande Armée has a normal movement of 4, but this is going to be reduced now to 3. So we're going to have Napoleon force march 2 extra points. So that'll give him a total of 5 movement points. He's going to spend 2 points to cross the Danube without a bridge. 1 for the space, 1 for crossing the river. That's 2. He's going to spend a 3rd point to control the region. So we'll place a French control marker there. He'll spend a 4th point to move into Prague, and the 5th point he will spend to take control of Prague. And we'll mark Prague with a French control marker. So right now we have the capital, we've got the 2 critical regions of the country under control. So at the end of the round, if nothing else happens, we will have defeated Austria. Now the problem is, if the Austrians can sever our supply lines, that we have to be in supply to control these forces. Now Napoleon is going to have to make a 2-point forced march roll. So right now we're at +2 for the 2 points that we forced marched. And we'll see what other modifiers might apply. Force composed exclusively of French, and that's -2. So we are actually at 0. So we'll make the roll with 0 modification. Napoleon's army is a size of 6. We'll be using the 6 to 8 column, no modifiers. Result is a 5, and that is 1 loss. So Napoleon has to take a step loss, and he will remove the 10th Corps. So the 10th Corps is a standard corps, and we'll place that into the force pool. That's going to complete France's 5th round. We'll move to the coalition's 5th round. All right, we're ready to begin the 5th round for the coalition, and an interesting situation has been discovered. I've placed these blocks to note the French supply lines. The ultimate French supply source is Strasbourg, so we have a green cube there. Supply lines have to be linked together with fortresses or fixed depots, and they have to be no more than 2 movement points apart. So as an example, Marmont's force in Bavaria is within 1, crossing the bridge 2. He's within 2, so he's in supply. The 2nd Corps is within 2 movement points of a source, in this case Strasbourg, 2 points to Ulm, and then it supplies the 2nd Corps. Another supply source would be from Ulm, 2 movement points to Salzburg, and then Davout could have supply within 1 movement point of there, and Napoleon is within 1, crossing the bridge 2 to Salzburg. So that's his supply line. Now if Archduke John can lay siege to Ulm, see if he was to move in there, that's going to block the supply connection to the Grande Armée. Because what will happen is his ultimate supply source will be Strasbourg. We can get 2 movement points into Bavaria here, so Marmont's force would be in supply, but from that fortress we have to be within 2 movement points to another fortress, and we can't do that. It's 1, 2 would be into here in Munich, but that's not a fortress. We can't go through the mountain pass, that costs 2 movement points. We can't go over the mountains, it's a +2 movement points. So that would, if he can take Ulm, that would block the supplies going to Davout in Venice and the Grande Armée in Prague. So that might be an interesting tactic for us to take a look at. So we'll make the coalition's fate roll and see what cards are available. And they rolled an E and a less than. All right, let's see what that is. All right, that says any face-up card or a permanent card. If there is only one or no face-up cards in the display, flip any one face-down card face-up until there are two face-up cards. Then play any face-up event, or play the lowest value ops card for any allowable purpose, or play a permanent card for any purpose. And then we fill the slot as we normally do. Coalition only has one card up, so I think they will flip, I guess, the D card. We'll flip that one. And they've got subsidies. Okay, that is a 3-value card. So their options are to either play any event, the lowest value op card that's face up for any purpose, or we can play one of our permanent cards. And I think that's what the Austrians are going to do. Coalition is going to play the Admiralty card for its 3-point activation, and that's going to give the Coalition 3 activation points. So we're going to move our cards remaining down to 2, and we'll see what we can do. All right, the Coalition is going to begin by spending 2 activation points of their 3 to activate Archduke John's force. He's in Innsbruck, and what he's going to do is move into the province of Ulm and lay siege to that. Now, he only has 2 movement points available because this is a bad weather turn, so his 3 is reduced to a 2. So he's going to attempt a 1-point forced march, and that will give him enough movement to move in there, convert the French control, and lay siege to Ulm. And that will be enough to sever Napoleon's line of communications. So, in effect, by doing that, Davout and Napoleon would be out of supply until that's rectified. Now, in order to lay siege to Ulm, we have to have at least 2 factors of combat units. So if somehow Archduke John loses one during the forced march, that will not allow him to besiege Ulm. But he has to do this because he has to maintain his supplies. He can't get supply in there if that's French controlled. So he's going to spend 1 movement point to move into Ulm. He'll spend a 2nd point to convert that to his control, and a 3rd point to lay siege to Ulm. All right. All right, he's going to have to make an attrition roll. His force consists of 2 strength points, so we'll be using the 2 to 3 column. He has a +1 modifier because he did the 1-point forced march. And we'll see what other modifiers might apply. And none of those will apply. So we'll be making a roll, a d6 roll, and we'll be adding 1 to the result. Okay, here's his roll. He rolls a 1, so that is a total of 2. And there's no effect from the forced march. Now he's going to resolve his siege attempt against Ulm. John has a offensive DRM of 1, so he'll be gaining 1 for this roll, and we get nothing for the siege duration. So here is his siege attempt. The roll is a 2, and that's a total of 3. And what happens there is stable, no effect. All right, so the siege will continue. Siege continues. We advance that duration to +1. And that has used 2 of the 3 activation points for the coalition. Now, incidentally, when Archduke John moved into Ulm, the Württemberg Corps or the 2nd Corps could not do any interceptions. You have to have a leader to do that. So there was no interception or marching to the sound of the guns available to them. Now, the coalition has 1 stored point, and they're going to use that plus the remaining point from the Admiralty card. That'll give them 2 points, and they'll have a 2-point activation. Now, their choices, they have 2 forces that they could activate. Mach's demoralized force cannot be activated. It has 3. It needs 3 points to activate that, so he's not an option. We have a force from Bellegarde, which is a standard 10th Corps and a supply depot, or the Russian army under Kutuzov. And I think they're going to select the army under Kutuzov. Now let's take a look at the situation here for Kutuzov. He has two elite forces, the first and second corps. Those are elite units. And he has this force with Buxhowden here next door in Brest-Litovsk. That is the Russian Guard and the 9th Corps. Now he has 3 movement points. Now this is a bad weather turn, so he's down to 2. The most he can force march is 3 points, so his maximum movement would be 5. He can spend 1 movement point to consolidate Buxhowden's force into the Russian First Army. That would leave him with 4 movement points. And if he moved 1, 2, 3, 4, he could move into Moravia and the city of Brunn. That would place him next to Napoleon in Prague. If he chose not to wait for Buxhowden's force, he would have a total of 5 movement points. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And he could attack Napoleon with his 2 elite corps. That is another possibility. Regardless of which option the Russians would choose, their attrition roll will be a little brutal because they're going to be crossing poor terrain. And that has a negative dice roll modifier on the attrition table, so that isn't going to sit well with them. Another option for us would be to activate Bellegarde's force and have him attempt to attack Davout at Vienna. That would be another option. We could use the 2 points to activate Bellegarde's force, and he could move 1 and 2 into Vienna, attacking Davout, which is now unsupplied. So that might be a better option for us. And I think the Austrians will probably choose that. The Russians are too far away. They really can't engage Napoleon with much strength. But this would be a way that the Austrians could retake Vienna, and then that combined with the supply line being cut would really put the French on the heels of a dilemma. So I think we are going to activate Bellegarde's force. So we'll activate Bellegarde. He's going to spend 1 movement point to cross the bridge into this space, and then technically Davout would have a interception attempt, but he's not going to use that. So Bellegarde is going to move into Vienna, and then he's going to attack Davout. Now, as the fortress in Vienna is not rebuilt, he doesn't have the option to evade into the fortress and accept siege, so he's going to have to fight the field battle. So we'll go through the battle resolution procedure. The first would be countermarches. Well, we do have a force adjacent to Vienna, but that is a demoralized force, and they cannot countermarch. Next is we're going to compute the odds, so we'll move these forces to the battle board. All right, so our next step now is to compute the odds. We've got Bellegarde with 2 strength points of his 10th Corps attacking Davout and his 1st Corps. So the odds are 2 to 2, 1 to 1. Level of the battle is going to be a skirmish. We only have 4 total factors involved, so we'll be using the first column. Now we determine our morale, and we have a morale of 3 for the Austrians and a morale of 5 for the French. Now we'll check our combat modifiers. The combat odds are 1 to 1, so that is 0. We check for cavalry superiority. Neither of them have it. Terrain effects, there are none. Then we do our supply check. Bellegarde is in supply. He is currently drawing supply from the Austrian fortress at Leopoldstadt. So there's no problem for him. But Davout is currently out of supply. That supply line has been severed with the action by Archduke John. So we have to place an unsupplied marker on Davout's force. So we'll mark Davout with an unsupplied marker. Now each side can declare elite or special units. And in this case, Davout will nominate his 1st Corps, and that is an elite one. He's going to gain +1 for that. So we'll mark him with a +1. Then we check the differentials, or I should say the tactical abilities of each of the commanders. Bellegarde has a 1 on attack, so he'll receive a +1 modifier. Davout has a 3 on defense, so that's going to move him up to 4. And then finally we would play any combat cards we have. Unfortunately, none of the combat cards for either side can be played. The French do have a horse artillery combat card, but that is under the condition of being in supply, which he is not. And the modifier for being unsupplied is -3, so that's going to move Davout down to a 1. And now we're going to resolve the battle. We'll start with the Austrian attack. They have a +1 DRM. We'll be using column 1 to 7 for the level of battle. Here's the roll. They did very well. They rolled an 11. That is modified to a 12. And the results of that, a 12 on column 1, is 1 loss. So the French have taken 1 loss. Now the French roll will be made. Here's their roll. They rolled a 7. That's modified to an 8. And an 8 on that chart is 0+. So in this case, no losses were incurred by the Austrians. The French have lost the battle. So the French will have to take their losses, and that's going to flip the first corps, taking 1 loss. Now, as this was a skirmish, there is no demoralization test. We don't have to worry about that. As there was no demoralization, there is no cavalry pursuit as well. So the Austrians hold the field, and they have liberated their capital of Vienna. So Davout's force has to retreat, and he's going to retreat, I think, to Salzburg. So we'll take his force and retreat that to Salzburg. Bellegarde is now in control of his capital, Vienna. So the French control marker is removed. And Bellegarde is going to spend his mobile supply depot to reconstruct the fortifications in Vienna. As it stands now, Austria will not fall at the end of the turn because the French no longer control the capital. So the coalition card that was played, the Admiralty card, was a permanent card that's placed in the discard, but that will return to the coalition hand next turn. And that's going to complete the 5th round of 1805. We'll move on to the start of the 6th round, which is a winter turn, and the French will try to react to what happened. The French have 3 cards remaining in their cards remaining display. And we're going to make a roll using the fate die and see which cards they'll be able to use. They have to not only reestablish their supply line, but they have to retake Vienna. Now, a winter turn not only affects movement, it's -1 to movement, but it has terrible penalties on attrition rolls. So we'll see what happens. Okay, here's the French fate die roll. And they have the E with a less than, which we've just seen. There are more than 2 face-up cards on the display, so the French options are to play any face-up event or play the lowest value ops card for any allowable purpose, or play a permanent card for any purpose. Those are the options. French are going to use their permanent card for any purpose, and they're going to play the Genius of Napoleon card for its activation. That'll give them 3 activation points. We'll move our cards remaining down to 2, and we'll see what we're going to do with those 3 activations. The first step is we have to reestablish our supply line. Now, the only force that we have in range that is still in supply is Marmont's force in northern Bavaria. His supplies are being traced through to Strasbourg. He's at a fortification, and that fortification is within 2 movement points to Strasbourg, so he's in supply. We're going to activate his force for 2 points. His force consists of the full strength 6 Corps, which is an elite unit, and the reduced Bavarian Corps. So we have a total of 3 movement points. It's -1 for the winter weather. So we have 2 movement points that we can use. And we could attempt to force march, but in winter it is brutal. In order to establish that supply line through Ulm, all we have to do is break the siege of John's force. If we can expel him from there, the supply line will be reestablished. So I think Marmont is going to move 1 movement point into Stuttgart and another point into Ulm. Now John could attempt an interception attempt in Stuttgart, but in this case I think he's better off where he is. And we'll begin our battle resolution. Countermarches. There'll be no countermarches. No leaders. Our forces commanded by leaders are adjacent to the province. Then we'll compute our odds and we'll move this to the battle board. All right, the forces we have the French with 3 factors attacking 2 factors that are besieging Ulm. So we have 3 to 2. That gives us a force odds of 1.5 to 1. Since we're at 0.5, we round up, and we've got 2 to 1. And that is going to give a positive dice roll modifier to the attacking force of Marmont. Our level of battle is 5, so that's going to be a skirmish. We'll be using the first column. Then we determine our morale. We have for the French a 5 and a 3. So we can choose which one we want to use, and we'll use the 6th Corps, giving us a 5. Austrians are at a morale of 3. Now we determine our combat modifiers, and we have our combat odds, which are going to give the attacker, in this case, +1. Let me get a blue one. All right. Next is cavalry superiority. Neither of them have any cavalry, so there will be nothing there. Terrain effects, there are none. We're in clear terrain. Then we do our supply checks. Both are in supply. There's no problems. Then we can declare elite or special units, and Marmont is going to declare his 6th Corps as his spearhead unit, giving him +1. The Austrians have no elite units. Commanding generals, Marmont has a 1. That'll give him value up to 3. John has a value of 1 on defense, and he'll gain 1 for that. Each side now can play combat cards, and the French are going to play the combat card Horse Artillery. Gives them a combat bonus of +1 under the condition of being in supply, and they are. So that will move up the combat modifier to 4 for the French. The Austrians don't have any combat cards that can apply at this point in the combat. And now we're going to resolve the battle. French will be rolling 2 dice using the first column. They have a +4 modifier. Here's the roll. And they've rolled a 7, so they are at 11 right now. 11 on the first column is going to give us a result of 1. So 1 point of damage is inflicted on the Austrians at this point. Now the Austrians will roll. They're getting a +1. Here's their roll. They rolled an 8, and that is modified to a 9. A 9 on the combat chart is a 0+. So in this case, the French have won the battle. Archduke John is going to be defeated. His 1 point of loss will be absorbed by his 4th Corps, which we will invert. There will be no demoralization or cavalry pursuit because we are in a skirmish, and now we have to do the retreats, and John's force must retreat. So Archduke John and his defeated army are going to retreat to the fortifications in Innsbruck. And Marmont has won a victory, a very important one, and that's going to reestablish the supply line going through Ulm. The French have played this horse artillery card, which is a combat bonus card, and we have to reduce the cards remaining down to 1 now. The card will go into the discard. And then we'll refresh by moving the top card from C, keeping the facing, and refreshing the missing card in A. French have 1 point of activation remaining, and they're going to spend that to activate the Grande Armée. His supply line is now reestablished. He can trace supply to Salzburg, which is under French control, and 2 points to Ulm, and 2 points back to Strasbourg. So Napoleon's Grande Armée is back in supply, and we're going to activate him. And his job is to retake Vienna. The Grande Armée currently has a movement value of 4, and that's going to be modified to 3 because of the winter weather conditions. Now, these are the tactical considerations for Napoleon. He currently has 3 movement points, so he has enough to reach the capital and do battle with Bellegarde. So he would move 1, crossing the bridge into Salzburg for 2, and 3 into Vienna. Now, the problem is if Bellegarde chooses to evade, he can automatically evade into the fortifications there. And then Napoleon would not have enough movement points to besiege the force. So he's going to have to do a 1-point forced march to be sure, in case Bellegarde chooses to avoid the field battle, he has to have an extra movement point to besiege that force. So he's going to do a 1-point forced march. Now that's tough in winter, but we have to do it. Now Napoleon has to be wary because if he just leaves Prague with nothing behind there, no garrison, theoretically during the last round, either the Russians could move in there or the demoralized army of Mach possibly could move in there. So he's going to have to leave some forces behind before he makes his move to Vienna. And I think he's going to leave behind the reduced strength 3rd and 4th Corps. That means his army will consist of the Reserve Cavalry Corps of 2 steps and the reduced Imperial Guard, along with Murat. So Napoleon will make his move as we indicated, moving to Salzburg and then into the space, the capital of Vienna, and try to bring Bellegarde to combat. Now Bellegarde could go into a siege. He could evade automatically into the fortifications, and then Napoleon would have to besiege him. Napoleon, with his tactical combat plus the army modifier, would more than likely force Bellegarde to surrender. So I think his best chance would probably be to fight the field battle. Now the first step before we fight the field battle is Napoleon has to resolve his forced march, and this was during winter. He already used an extra point to get there. So we'll take a look at the attrition table. Napoleon's force consists of 3 factors, so we'll be using the 2 to 3 column. He force marched 1 point, so it's +1. It's a winter round, +2, so that is up to 3 right now for his modifier. And his force is composed exclusively of French forces, so he'll get -2. So right now, the die roll modifier is 1. All right, he's going to make his attrition roll, +1. The result is a 4 that's modified to a 5, and that is no effect. So he'll have no losses for this battle. And now we're going to resolve the Battle of Vienna. Now the first step is counter marches. Now we do have a force, although they are currently listed as unsupplied. Davout could countermarch to the sound of the guns from Salzburg. And we'll see if we want to do that. And I think he will attempt the countermarch. Now, we do have the ability in a countermarch, the general commanding an army in the battle zone can substitute his value instead of using the tactical value of the force that is going to attempt the countermarch. So in this case, it's 3 for Napoleon. And we'll make that roll and see if he can get a 5 or greater to bring Davout's force into the battle by countermarch. He rolled a 4, and that is 7. That's great, and Davout's force is now going to be included into the battle. Now, unfortunately, a countermarch, we have to do an attrition test. So Davout's force is 1. So we're going to give him a modifier of 1 for now. It required 1 movement point to move into that space, so the countermarch is going to be +1. That's what we've got here. Now this is a winter round. It's going to be added 2 to that result, so we're at 3. And in this case, we have a force composed exclusively of French. That will be -2. So we're back down to 1. And we'll be using the 1 column. And in this case, since it's only 1 factor, there is no chance of losing any steps in the attrition roll. So we don't have to worry about it. Incidentally, that supply marker is out of supply marker is no longer valid because we would have checked supply for Davout when he attempted his countermarch. So in this case, he was resupplied in Salzburg, back to Ulm, and back to Strasbourg. Now we have to combine the forces, and Napoleon is going to absorb Davout's force into the Grande Armée. And we'll set this up on the battle board. And our first step of the battle is to compute our odds. Napoleon has a total of 2, 3, 4 factors to the Austrians 2, so that's 2 to 1. Then we'll calculate our level of battle. We have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so it's going to be a skirmish. Now we'll compute our morale, and the Austrians will be at a 3. We have 2 steps of 4, and 1 step of 5, and 1 step of 6, so the morale of the Grande Armée is now at 4. And we'll go through our combat dice roll modifiers. And the first one is combat odds. We're at 2 to 1, so that means the French will gain +1. Cavalry superiority. And yes, we have a total of 2 reserve cavalry with the cavalry commander Murat. It gives us an extra 1. We're up to +2 now. There will be no terrain effects. And we'll go to our supply check. Both forces are in supply. Next, each side can declare elite and special units, and I think Napoleon is going to commit the Imperial Guard. That's going to give him +2 dice roll modifier, moves him up to 4. Austrians have no elite units. Then it is the commanding generals. We have Napoleon in command of the Grande Armée. That gives him an offensive capability of 3. That's going to move him up to 7. And we'll mark him with 7. Bellegarde is on defense, and he has a 0 for defense. And then we can declare subordinate generals if in an army, and Napoleon is going to do it. He will declare Davout as his subordinate, giving him another 3. It's going to move him up to 10 now. And then finally, each side can play a combat cards if they choose. And the French have a combat card they could use, taken in the flank, but I don't think we're going to need it. So we will reserve that for later. The Austrians don't have a card they can play at this time. And now we'll resolve the battle, and the French will start with their attack. They're getting +10. Here is the roll. Result is an 11. They've got 21, and that will be a maximum result of 16. They have a 2+, so that is going to inflict 2 casualties on the Austrians. Now the Austrian roll will take place. They have no modifiers. Here's the roll. They rolled a 5, and that's not so good. A 5 on that column is 0, so Napoleon has won the battle. Napoleon will have to check for the leader loss for Davout. So we'll roll a die and see what happens. On a result of 6, he is going to be wounded. The result is a 6, and Davout is wounded in the battle, and he'll be placed in the reserves. Now we have to remove losses, and the Austrians are completely decimated. They have to lose 2. That's both of their steps. Bellegarde is removed from play and placed into the reserves. There is no demoralization test and no cavalry pursuit, and no retreat because the defeated force has been eliminated. And now that Napoleon won the battle in the space, he is entitled to a free siege attempt, and he will do so and attempt to besiege Vienna. We'll place a siege +0 marker there, and then Napoleon can add in his tactical ability plus the +1 for him being in an army. He's at +4. So we'll make the siege attempt on Vienna with a +4 modifier. If Napoleon can pass this siege roll, the Austrians are going to be in a world of hurt. And they're going to have to do pretty much a miraculous effort on their last round to stave off being defeated. Okay, here is the siege roll. We're at +4. The result is a 6, and that's a 10, and that means breach. And Napoleon has taken the capital of Vienna. So we'll remove the siege marker and replace that with a destroyed fort and a French control marker. That is awesome. And that's going to complete the French round. And we'll move on to the final round. Unless somehow a winter turn would come out, we could have a 7th round. It is possible with the event card. But we'll move on to the coalition's 6th round, and this is a winter turn, and this might be the last round. Coalition will make their fate die roll, and we'll see what cards are available. And they've rolled a C less than and exclamation points. Let's see what that is. And that reads C, or lowest face-up ops card or special. If not already face-up, flip the card in slot C. And then play C, or the lowest valued face-up op card in slots A, B, D, or E for any allowable purpose, or play a permanent card for any allowable purpose. If there are multiple low-valued ops cards, choose which one to play and then refill the card accordingly. All right. So the coalition will flip card C up, and then they can play any face-up card that they choose. I'm sorry, that's actually card C, or the lowest valued face-up ops card in slots A, B, D, or E, or play a permanent card for any allowable purpose. Well, the lowest valued card they have is 1, so that would mandate that they play the Intrigues card for 1 point. They can't do much with that. So I think they're going to play one of their permanent cards, and they're going to use the Holy Russia card and play that for 2 activation points. That's the best they can do. It's going to reduce their cards remaining down to 1. Well, the coalition is in a bad way. As it stands now, if nothing changed, Napoleon is going to defeat Austria, and they're going to be out of the war. They basically have 2 choices. We don't have enough to activate the demoralized army of Germany. So we have either Kutuzov's Russian army, or we have John's army in the Tyrol, which now currently consists of only a single step in the 4th Corps. So the only way that they can prevent the collapse of Austria is to either retake one of the Austrian critical locations like Prague, or to sever the supply line again, and that would deny Napoleon his victory, because you have to have a supplied army in order to control for the purposes of defeating a nation. Kutuzov would have to undergo a brutal forced march across poor terrain in winter, so I don't think that is a viable possibility. That would leave us then with John's force in the Tyrol. Now, John only has 2 movement points without forced marching because it's winter. His 3 would be reduced down to 2. The only viable thing he can do is attempt to cross through the mountain path and besiege Salzburg and sever that supply line. Now, unfortunately, that means that Napoleon would be able to attempt an interception, and he has cavalry superiority, and that would more than likely give him a good chance on being able to intercept him. Not to mention, John would have to force march, and he only has 1 step. I think the only possible chance is for John to try to sever that supply line. So he is going to have to do a 1-point forced march. He'll spend all of his movement just to get into Salzburg, and then he's going to need 1 point to besiege the fortress. So we will do that. John is going to attempt a 1-point forced march. He currently has 2 movement points. Now +1 is 3. So he'll spend 2 crossing the mountain path, 1 to get in and 1 to cross the path. And that will move him into Salzburg. And now Napoleon could react and attempt to intercept him in Salzburg. And I think he will do that. Napoleon has 1 card remaining, and he's going to play the 2-point taken in the flank card to pay for his interception attempt. That moves Napoleon's force down to 0 cards remaining. Napoleon is going to attempt interception, and he has to get he's paid for the prerequisite card. He has the following modifiers: +1 for cavalry superiority, and +1, his initiative is lower than the active player. That is true. So he's going to be gaining a +2 for this attempt. So Napoleon's interception attempt will be at +2. He needs to get a 5 or greater. And here is his interception attempt. He rolls a 5, he's got 7, and he is going to be able to intercept John's moving into Salzburg. Napoleon is going to leave behind the First Corps in Vienna, and he will move into Salzburg and intercept John moving in there. John will have to do a attrition test, but since he only has 1 strength point, he can't lose anything in the process. So that will be no problem. So now we're going to have to resolve the battle. And this is Archduke John's last chance to try to prevent the collapse of Austria. So he's going to be attacking with 1 strength point of his 4th Corps. Napoleon's army has 3 strength points. This will be a skirmish, and the morale level will be 3, and Napoleon's level will be a 4. There's 2 steps of level 4. Combat value of the modifiers will be the odds. We have 3 to 1, and that's going to give Napoleon a +2. So we'll mark Napoleon with +2. Next is the cavalry superiority, which he possesses. That'll move him up 1 to +3. There are no terrain effects, and both forces are in supply. Napoleon is going to declare his guard, Imperial Guard, as his spearhead, which will give him +2. He's at 5. Napoleon is the commanding general. That's going to earn him 3 on defense. John has a defensive value or attack value of 1, so he'll earn +1. Napoleon can designate a subordinate, and he'll use Murat, which will be 1. It'll increase it to 9. And then we would play combat cards. There are none that are going to be played at this time, so we'll resolve the battle. This is probably not going to end well for Archduke John. John has a +1, and here's his die roll. He rolls a 4, and that's not going to be good enough. That's a total of 5, which does 0. Now Napoleon will roll. He's getting a +9. He rolled an 8. That is a total of 17. And that's going to max it out, and he gets a 2+ result. So the Austrians are going to take 2 damage. That is going to defeat the 4th Corps, and John are both placed into the reserves, and Napoleon has won the battle. And that's going to bring the activation for this 1805 turn to a close. Now we move on to the conquest and surrenders phase, and we would take care of conquest and surrenders from the minor powers, and then major powers are determined. A minor nation is conquered if its capital and all of its fortresses are controlled by the other side and can trace supply to a supply source. And in that case, two provinces or two minor nations are going to be defeated. First one is Thuringe. French have a control marker there, so they control Erfurt and that star, and that's going to change that over to national territory. If the conditions are met, the minor nation receives an ally marker if it has combat units. If it has none, the conqueror chooses to place an ally or national territory marker. So in this case, the French will place a national territory marker in Thuringe. The other minor nation is the Papal States. They don't have any forces either, but the French with Sincere are in control of Rome, so we're going to change that over to a national control marker. We'll move on to the major nation conquests, and Austria is going to be defeated. French control the capital of Vienna, which is a critical location. They also control a critical location here in Prague. So they control both of those plus the capital, and Austria is going to fall. So we're going to resolve our peace conditions. A defeated major power must suffer the following peace conditions every time it is conquered. A forced peace is imposed on the defeated major power and its unconquered minor allies. The victor receives an additional card in the next card draw, or 4 resources in its budget. If France is the victor, it imposes the continental blockade, whether the event continental blockade has been played or not, on all ports of the defeated major power and its minor allies until it once again joins the coalition. So that means that the ports of Venice, Trieste, and Zara are going to be under the continental blockade, including the Papal States with Ancillon. Next, the conquering power and its allies can annex 3 provinces of the defeated power and integrate them into their national territory. The victor chooses the provinces. A conquered province receives a national territory marker and is integrated into its national territory. To begin, France is going to annex the province of Venice, and that is going to create a new entity with the inclusion of Milan, Roman, and Venice. You see those special marks there? That is going to create the Kingdom of Italy. With the creation of Italy, France is going to be able to add an Italian core to their force pool. Next, they are going to annex Tyrol, and that is going to create the Kingdom of Bavaria. And that's going to earn the empire an extra card draw in the next phase. And for the third annexation, Napoleon is going to annex Salzburg. And that will become part of the French national territory. The next consideration is the status of the conqueror's forces. He can choose to remain in the territory or he can leave it. In the latter case, the units are simply placed in the nearest frontier zone in terms of movement points containing a fortress. So in this case, the French units are going to redeploy to their nearest base that they have, and that's going to be in Salzburg. So all of the French forces are going to be that are currently in Austria will be moved to that location. And in turn, the control markers that were present are also removed. Any forces remaining of the conquered nation can be redeployed to a critical zone anywhere in the country at no cost in attrition or in movement points. So Mach's army is going to be moved into Vienna. Now, Austria is going to be under a duration of forced peace. The conqueror and his allies cannot declare war on the conquered nation and his allied minors, and vice versa, starting on the first turn after the conquest. The The conquered power rolls a die at the end of each conquest phase to determine if the force peace continues another year. Add 2 to the die roll if it is the second year or later after the conquest. If the roll is equal to or greater than 5, the force peace will end. Okay, so Austria is a defeated power. Now we have to consult the escalade and victory table. And whenever any of these situations occur, there will be an increase in escalade and victory points. Escalade we didn't talk about, but that represents a level of increasing unconditional opposition of European powers against France. When this level reaches 15 points, the punishment cards are shuffled in to all of the epic cards of the draw deck. And those punishment cards are better for the coalition and not as good for the empire. So in this case, we have conquered Austria. So the escalade is going to go up 1 and 1 victory point will occur. So our victory point level will go up by 1. It's up to 6. And then we also increase the escalade by 1. And once again, if escalade gets to 15, that's when those punishment cards will be added to the decks. So what we do then is we move our round marker to the first round, and it will now be the year 1806. And that is going to bring the 1805 turn to a close. Now we begin our interphase, and we begin with the declaration of war phase. Each side, the coalition and then the empire, will make their declarations of war on minor and major countries. As it stands now, France and Spain are at war with Britain and Russia. The Austrians are now on a forced peace. Well, the coalition does not want to declare war on either Prussia or the Ottomans, so they won't be doing anything this turn. The empire has to decide if they want to declare war on any countries. The most obvious would be Prussia. And I think it's likely that the French will want to declare war on Prussia. They're kind of a thorn in their side, and we need to expand into Central Europe, so we will do that. And checking our escalade and victory point chart, it says that the first declaration of war to a neutral major power is +1 to the escalade, so the escalade now is at 2. Now we move on to the hand building phase, and we're going to consult our card management assignment table. The first step of the hand building phase is each side can discard any cards that are face up on their display and open those slots up for new cards. Now, the only cards that cannot be discarded would be the Snare of Bayonne and the Continental Blockade cards. Those cannot be discarded. For France, we've got the Cavalry of the Guard and Schulmeister. So I think we'll keep those cards. Those have some pretty good events on them. So we'll keep those. For the coalition, we have the Monarch Takes Command. It's a combat card, Intrigues, and Subsidies. And those are pretty good in the diplomacy and budget phases, so we'll keep those. Now we go to our card assignment table, and this is going to determine how many cards we're going to have for the next year, 1806. And what we do is we'll start out with the Empire, and we place cubes on any of these situations that apply. As an example, the Empire is in control of Paris, so they're going to get a card, and that would be their permanent card. And going down, we find out the Kingdom of Bavaria, Tyrol annexed by Bavaria. No card if Munich or Innsbruck are controlled by the coalition. Well, we qualify for that. We also have Bordeaux, Lyon, and Antwerp. And we defeated a major power last turn, so the French will qualify for that as well. And there's situations where both sides could qualify. In this case, we've got Mantua. We have control of that. Now that France has declared war on Prussia, the coalition will have Berlin and Königsberg and Warsaw. They also have Gibraltar and Malta. They also control Lisbon. Then for France, we control Madrid as they're an ally of ours. Now we'll take a look at the coalition only sections. And we have London. Well, that's the British permanent card. And then we have, now Vienna has been, the Austrians are defeated, so they're not going to get that one anymore. They will get Moscow. No longer control Prague. They do control St. Petersburg, and they also control Odessa and Kiev. All right. You also have the option of building a free British fleet, or we can take a card. And I think the British will take the card, so we'll mark that accordingly. And then we have 4 resources, Britain only, and that will occur in the budget phase. All right, so we can get our count now. The Empire has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So their hand limit is 8. We'll move the hand size for the Empire to 8. And the coalition has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Coalition has 9. We'll mark them at 9. All right. Then we take care of our permanent cards. Now the Austrian permanent card is, we don't get that anymore because Austria is defeated. But we are going to get the Admiralty card, which is the British permanent card, and Holy Russia, the Russia permanent card. We've already set the coalition's hand size to 9, so we'll put their cards remaining to 9, and then these cards now will be available during the rest of the interphase. And then we'll start, as we play any cards during the diplomacy or budget phase, that card tracker will go down. And the same thing will happen for the Empire. We've set their hand size to 8. We'll mark them with 8 cards remaining. And they are going to get their Genius of Napoleon permanent card because they control Paris. Now we'll move on to the budget phase, and we begin by checking the resource table for each of the major powers. We've got France with 14, Britain with 6, and they have some special resources. They can take a free fleet or an extra card. They're going to be taking the extra card. Russia and Austria have 12. Prussia has 5 to begin with, and they would be able to increase that if they've played the Reforms Holy Roman Empire card. And that will increase their production to 8. Spain has 4, and so does Turkey. Spain can be increased if they have the War of Liberations card has been played, but then they can no longer produce any fleets. So we'll give each of the empires their starting money. And incidentally, if any of the countries had lost any of their key zones, they would lose 4 resources for each of those. That hasn't occurred yet. All right, so I've given each of the powers their allotted amount of resources, and I'm using these golden money chips that I like to use to account for these. Then we shift into the expenditure of resources. The Empire will manage the production of Spain and Turkey while those states are neutral. And the Empire also manages the production of all major powers in forced peace or forced alliance, which have been defeated by the coalition. Coalition will manage the production of Prussia, Austria, and Russia while they're in a neutral state. And they will also manage the production of all major powers in forced peace or forced alliances, which have been defeated by the Empire. So, in this case, France is going to dictate the production of Turkey, and the coalition will dictate the production of Austria, since they are now in a forced peace. Now during these phases we will go in what would be reverse order. We're going to begin with Turkey and then go to Spain, Prussia, Austria, Russia, Britain, and then France. So we'll begin with the Ottomans, Turkey. I'll bring up the production table on the screen, and this is going to be the cost of any units that we choose to build for that nation. Now, the Ottomans only have 4 points, so let's see what they would probably want to build. They have 2 cores Well, they actually have 3 cores and a supply depot, and they have 1 leader. Now, leaders can be brought in at this time for no cost. They also have an army they could produce as well. I think the Ottomans are going to produce 1 step of reserve cavalry. That's going to cost them 2. And then they're going to produce 1 step each of the 1st and 2nd corps. And that will cost them 1 each. So they've spent their entire allotment there. Now we'll move on to Spain. Spain has 4 points. They've got the 2nd corps would be in there. They can purchase that. That would cost them 2. So we'll spend that. And you can also spend resources to rejuvenate existing units on the map. Spain does have 1 unit that is at reduced strength, and that's in Blake's force, and we'll spend a point to reestablish the 3rd corps to full power. And that'll be the extent of their purchases. They're going to waste 1 production point, but Spain's under some limitations as to what they can do until the Iberian Peninsula is released from those restrictions by play of some certain cards, particularly the Snare of Bayonne. We'll move on to Prussia. They have 5 points available. Now, Prussia has an elite unit and a standard corps. Now, elite units, elite infantry, are an extra half a point per step. So if we were to build the entire 1st corps, that would cost us 3. 5th corps would cost us 2. So they'll end up probably doing that. They're going to build both of those at a cost of 5. Now we'll move on to Austria, and this would be built by the coalition player since Austria is in a forced peace. They have a total of 12 production points, and we'll see what they want to build. Now, cards can also be played during the interphase. If the card at the bottom of the card says that it can be played during that phase. As an example, Coalition has this card Subsidies. It can be played during the budget phase, and it says a major ally of Britain or a major power defeated by France doubles its resources, or 2 cards are added to the coalition hand for the coming turn. Well, we're going to use that part of it. So we're going to add 2 cards to the coalition's hand. So the coalition's hand size is increased by 2. It's up to 11 now. And we're going to have to spend 1, though, to play the Subsidies card. So that is going to draw 1 card away. Right now they have 10 cards available. And then the space that that card was played from would be refilled, keeping the orientation of the card on top of the draw deck. And the Subsidies card is placed in the discard. Now we can start building some new units. I think a top priority for Austria would definitely be their reserve cavalry unit. And we'll build both steps of that, and that's going to cost them 4 points. So we'll build the reserve cavalry. That'll be a cost of 4. So that'll leave them with a total of 8. I think they'll build 2 depots. That'll cost them a half a point each. So that'll be 1 point. And that'll give them a total of 7 production points left, 7 resources. I think we'll rebuild these corps that they lost during the campaign. 1st Corps, 9th Corps, and 3rd Corps. Those will each cost us 2 points each, so that will be a total of 6. And we'll pay the 6. And then we'll add these to our placement schedule. They have 1 point left. And I think for 1 point, they will end up building this diminished 7th Corps. We'll add that to the tally. That'll be all the production for Austria. Now we'll move on to Russia. And Russia is going to build probably the 2 depots. That'll cost them 1. We'll add those to their production schedule. And I think the reserve cavalry would be important. That's going to cost them a total of 4. So we'll pay for that. That'll leave Russia with 7. Now the reserve cavalry has to be placed into an army. You can't place it by itself, so that's going to have to go into an army. They have a total of 7 points left, so I think they will build these 3 corps, full strength, 2, 4, 6, and that will leave them with 1 point remaining. Russia has 1 point left, and I think they're going to give that to Britain. It has to be an ally, so we will donate that to Britain. You can give up to 4 points to a fellow compadre of that coalition. We'll move on to Britain. Now, Britain has the ability to spend 4 resources to gain an extra card. And I don't know if they're going to do that, but we'll see. These are, by the way, these are special units, and those only come into play when a card is played to get them in. So we'll see what Britain's going to do. I think Britain, they have 7 points. I think they will build their mobile supply depot. That'll be a half a point. And then they're going to build, I think, 2 steps of their second corps, which is an elite unit. It's going to cost them a total of 4. So they've spent 4.5 right now. So they've got 3 remaining. And I think they will purchase the entire 3rd corps for 2 points and a half step of the 4th corps for a 3rd point. That'll use up all of their production. And now we'll get to France. France is going to play a card during this phase, and they're going to play the Cavalry of the Guard card. That can be played during the budget phase, and it says place the special French cavalry unit +2 with Napoleon's army if in supply. Then that card is going to be discarded. We'll have to move the French cards remaining down from 8 to 7. And then we're going to gain that French Guard cavalry unit, which we'll place with Napoleon's army. Now there's limitations as to how many forces we can place in an army. We can have a total of 2 lost steps, including reserve cavalry to strengthen reduced units, 2 mobile depots, an unlimited number of special units, and a maximum of 3 subordinate generals. As for production, I think France is going to build this 5th corps. That's an elite unit that'll cost them 4. So they're down to 10. They're going to build 3 of these mobile supply units. That'll cost them 1.5. That'll leave France with 8.5 remaining. I think they'll spend that other half and build another mobile supply depot. Puts them down to 8. I think France will build a fleet, and that's going to cost them 5. So we're down to 3 points. And I think we'll spend that 3 by producing 3 of these 1-step corps. That'll be all the French production. Now there are limitations as to what you can place in an army, especially if it is outside of a reinforcement zone. A reinforcement zone would be the capital of the nation or a unbesieged fortress within the nation's borders. Now, Napoleon's Grande Armée is currently it's deployed right now into Salzburg, which, although it is French territory, it is not considered a reinforcement zone. But there are some things you can place into an army even if it's not in a reinforcement zone. That would be 2 lost steps, including reserve cavalry, to strengthen reduced units, 2 mobile depots, an unlimited number of special units, and a maximum of 3 subordinate generals. All right. Now we can rebuild minor country units. Minor nations do not produce anything, but its forces are deployed on the map when it is attacked. A minor power must remove all its units from the map when it is conquered. Each player receives 1 step of a minor nation's unit for every 2 minor powers they have units for, and which are allied to him. So, in the case of Britain, Britain has Naples, and they also have Portugal, and they have Sweden. So they have 3. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5, and in this case we round down. So Britain would be able to produce 1 minor unit in their force pool, or on the board and refreshing it to full strength. All of the units that Britain has are at full strength amongst their minors. For France, France has several. France has Holland, Italy, So they've got 2 of them. They also have Bavaria, so it's a total of 3. And they have Bad, that's a 4th. So they would get a total of 2 units that they could build, 2 points, 2 step losses. So I think what they'll do is they'll build 1 step of the Italians, which is 1 there, and they'll build 1 step of the Dutch. And those have to be placed in their home countries. And now we'll switch to placement of the new units. Now I made one oversight regarding the Turkish. We built this reserve cavalry. We can't build that until the army is built. Reserve cavalry has to go in an army. So we're going to reclaim 2 points of production value. And instead of purchasing that, I think what we'll do is we'll try to look for something nothing there we can build. So the reserve cavalry can't come in unless we build that army first. So I think the Ottomans, instead of their purchases that they made, we're going to have them build their army in Andropol. That will cost 2 points. And then we'll build that reserve cavalry for 2. That'll be all of their 4 points. We'll add that into the army. So the Turkish army now consists of 2 steps of infantry and 1 step of reserve cavalry. Spain is going to place the 2 points that they have of the 2nd Corps, and they'll put that with Castanos in Madrid. That'll give him 2 corps there. That'll finish Spain. Move on to Prussia. They're going to put that elite formation that they built. We'll put that directly into the Army of the Elbe. That's within the 2 points that they're able to place directly in an army. And they'll place this 5th Corps that they have, and we'll place that in Kirsten. Next we'll move on to Austria. And Austria is going to place their forces and make some changes to their leadership. Right now Mach is in command of the army. We're going to replace him with Charles. Charles will take command of the Army of Germany. And we're also going to place that reserve cavalry that we purchased, and the 2 mobile supply depots will also be placed in the Army of Germany. And then our other forces, we're going to place some units in Trieste, 1 in Prague, and Leopoldstadt, and Ezik. And for Mother Russia, we're going to place the reserve cavalry and 2 mobile supply depots with Kutuzov and the Russian First Army. For the British, we'll place the elite 2nd Corps into Moore's force. Moore can control up to 6 factors of units, and that'll put him at max. We'll also give him the mobile supply depot. It's his 2nd. And these other units will place the 3rd Corps in Portsmouth, and the reduced 4th Corps will place in Yarmouth. Now for France. For France, we're going to place 2 mobile supply depots in Napoleon's Grande Armée. The Army of Italy will place a mobile supply depot and the 17th Corps. Those will be placed into Massena's army. Then we're going to create a new force by taking Davout out of the reserves. He's going to control up to a total of 6 strength points, and we'll give him the 5th Corps, the reduced 10th, the reduced 16th, and a mobile supply depot. And we'll place him in Liege. Then we have a French fleet. Those can be placed in any location that is a port within the home territory. And I think we'll place that in Toulon. And they have some minors. We'll place the reduced strength Dutch Corps in Holland, and we'll place the Italian Corps in Mantua. And that's going to complete the budget phase. Now we move on to the diplomatic phase, and this is one of the more interesting parts of the interphase. We can make attempts at getting major and minor powers to our faction. In order to perform diplomatic actions, we have to play a card from our hand. The activation value must be a minimum of 3 for a major power attempt, 2 for a minor power attempt if that country has units, and 1 for any other. We're limited to 1 diplomatic action against 1 major power and another one against a minor power, or 1 diplomatic action against 2 minors. Those are the regulations. Now, to account for the unique nature of this game as opposed to other card-driven games, we have to make a slight change to the budget and the diplomacy phases and the number of cards we have available to us. So what I propose for my rules is that we take the total hand size, subtract out the permanent cards and the number of face-up cards that the faction has, and then we can draw a number of cards from the deck temporarily. So in this case, we have 11 minus 2. Minus 2 is 4. We can draw 7 cards, and then those can be played during the budget or diplomacy phases. Whatever cards we don't use from that are put back into the deck and shuffled in, and that temporarily gives us access to those cards that we would have if this was a standard game. So we'll draw 7 cards for the coalition. So we're able to use these during these 2 important phases. So they have the Rights of Man that could be played during the diplomacy phase. The Major Campaign card can't. Dos de Mayo could be played during diplomacy. It's a combat card. This could be played in the budget phase. Rothschild could be played in the budget phase. Winter Campaign cannot. So these cards would be the ones that we'd have available to us, plus these face-up cards during these important phases. So beginning with the coalition player, we will consult our diplomatic table, and then that would tell us the diplomatic bonus, if any, if we make a diplomatic offer to that nation. So in this case, I think the coalition is going to attempt a diplomatic action against Turkey. We don't get any benefit. There's no diplomatic bonus for it, but we'll give it a shot. So we can play any one of our 3-point cards that we have, and I think they will play the 3-point card Dos de Mayo. We can't play that yet because it has to be the Snare of Bayonne, and the card must be played first. So we'll use that 3-point card, and then we make a die roll. And if we're able to get a modified value of 6, we have successfully brought that major power into our side. So the coalition will make their roll. They need a 6, basically. There's no modifiers to this. They rolled a 4, so they've used a card that goes down to 9. They can make a minor offer as well to a minor power. I think for their second action, they're going to make a 2-point play to try to bring Tunisia into their fold. Tunisia has a military unit, so we have to spend a 2-point card. That'll move their cards remaining down to 8. There's no modifier for this, and we'll make the roll on a 6. They will have successfully convinced Tunisia to join the coalition. And they have failed. So that is the end of the coalition's diplomatic attempts. We take any of the cards that we've used, and those will be returned to the coalition draw deck and shuffled in. And the 2 cards that they played for diplomacy, those will go into the discards. Now for France, we'll do the same thing. We've got a hand size of 8. There are 2 face-up cards, including the permanent cards. So we can draw 6 cards that we can use during these phases. French have 3 cards that have diplomacy or budget on them, so those could be used during these turns. And I think France is going to play the card Persia, and we'll use that for the 3 points, and we'll attempt to convert Turkey to our side. Now we get a +1 as listed on the diplomacy chart. So France will move their cards remaining down 1, and then we'll make the roll. France is getting a +1 modifier. Turkey is more malleable to the empire than they are to the coalition. Here's the roll. Result is a 2 modified to a 3, and we have failed. And I think that's all the cards that the empire will play. The unplayed cards will be put back into the deck and shuffled in. That concludes the diplomatic phase. We would move on to the neutral major power movement phase. And just as we have the major powers that will be controlling these neutral majors, same thing can happen. Turkey is going to be controlled by France, and now there are no other major neutrals other than that. Prussia is now at war. So we'll deal with Turkey. I think Turkey is going to move their army that is currently in Andropol, and you can move them up to their normal movement rates. In this case, the speed of that army is 3. So we can move them up to 3 spaces. 1, 2, picking up the Bulgarian unit, and 3, they'll move into Izmail, and where they can watch the Russians on that border. The final step of the interphase is the strategic redeployment phase, and this is a very clever mechanism in the game. What it does is it allows the major powers to move their forces longer distances and kind of saves that time of that slow crawl that they would normally use during play to get them near the places of action on the board. We do this in reverse order, from Turkey, Spain, Prussia, Austria, Russia, Britain, and then France. So each major power, with the exception of the neutral powers, can move during this phase on condition they do not enter a zone which contains one or more several enemy units, including depots, unbesieged enemy fortresses, an enemy control marker, or in a place where the force would not be supplied. And you're able to move double the movement factor, but an attrition test would be made at the end of the movement if the force exceeds its printed amount. So we can always move our printed amount without penalty. Turkey is neutral, so they can't move anything, but we'll take a look at Spain and see what they want to do. Well, Spain has this fairly large force under Castanos in Madrid, and I think we'll have him use his 3 movement points and move closer to the Portuguese border. So we'll have him spend 2 points to cross the mountains and a 3rd point to enter the space, and we'll move him there. And that'll get him in position where he might be able to make a run eventually at Lisbon. Next up is the Prussians, and I think since they're going to be at war now, they're probably going to move this force under Hohenlohe. He has a corps and a mobile supply depot, and we'll get him closer to the capital. We'll move him to Berlin. So he'll move 1, 2, picking up that corps. He can have up to 4 steps. So that would be his 4 steps there. And if he moves into Berlin, he will be overstacking. So we don't want to do that. Well, I guess we'll just leave him where he is there. That'll get him closer to the action. We have Austria. They're neutral, so they won't be moving during this phase. We'll move on to the Russians. Well, the Russians don't care for the Turkish army across the border there, so they're going to move Tormasov and his corps from Kiev, and he'll move 1, 2, 3 into Odessa. And he can command up to 5 points, so he's got a total of 4 there. Kutuzov is now going to have to try to rush to help the Prussians. So we don't want to force march with these guys because that's going to force us to do a test. And so I think what we'll do is Kutuzov is going to move into Brest-Litovsk, and he will absorb Buxhausen's force into the First Army. That's 1 movement point. He'll have a 2nd and 3rd movement point to cross the river into northern Lithuania, and that will be the extent of his movement. That's 3 movement points. Benningsen is next door in Vilna, so we could have him move and join up into Kutuzov's army. Kutuzov can control up to 14 factors. It's doubled when you're in control of an army, so we'll do that. And there's an army up in Moscow, and we can move that up to 3 movement points. I think he'll do 1, 2, and 3. We'll move him into Smolensk. And I think that'll be all the movements for the Russians. British will just keep in position where they are. They've got Moore's army, or force I should say, in London, and they've built a couple of lone corps that are on the coast in case France gets ambitious. Now we'll move on to France, and I think the Grande Armée is going to take 4 movement points. That is the current movement rate that they have, and we'll try to get in position to get closer to Brunswick's force. We also want to link up with Davout. So I think he'll move 1, picking up that 2nd Corps. We'll add that to the Grande Armée. 2 will move and pick up Marmont's force, adding that into the Grande Armée. 3 will move into Bade, and 4 will move into the Palatinate. And I think we'll just leave it there at this point. And then for the Army of Italy, I think we're going to move them into Salzburg. We'll try to get them closer to watch the Austrians. So I think Massena has a movement value of 3. He has the Army of Italy with him, so he'll spend 2 to move into Zurich, crossing the mountain pass, and 3 into Ulm. And we'll leave it at that. And that's going to finish the interphase for 1806. And I think I'm going to end the video here. I wanted to make sure I give the viewers as complete as possible of a playthrough using that CDG Solo System with my new playsheet. And so far I'm pretty happy with how that's functioning. I think it works pretty well. I'm going to have to continue playtesting this. I am going to be posting that on BGG. I posted one back about, I think quite a few years ago already, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I had my original playsheet, and I will post this version 1.2 there in case you wish to try it out. So I hope you enjoyed this playthrough and this demonstration of the CDG Solo System for Napoleon against Europe. It's a fine game, captures the Napoleonic warfare I think very well, and I enjoyed quite a bit. This game will definitely be coming back to the channel where we'll go into some more in-depth into the rules and strategies for each side. So until then, this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club signing off, wishing everyone a pleasant evening. Good night.